E aku nui, e aku rahi, rau rangatirama ki te rangi. Tēnei te mihi ki a koutou, kua tai mai nei e runga i te kaupapa o te rā. Me mihi ka tika ki a koutou e pūpiri nei i te mana whenua o te, tēnei wāhi nā pōtiki, tēnā koutou. O tira, ki a koutou kua tai mai nei i ngā hau e whā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, Rod. Hello to everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As Rod has said, my name's Shane Stuart, and I'm Innovation Manager with the University of Waikato and Priority One, based here in Tauranga, and I'm going to be talking today about PlantTech, which is a new collaborative initiative here in the Western Bay. And I've had the great privilege of working on PlantTech over the last couple of years to help develop and establish it. So it's really, it's kind of cool to be able to share it with you all today. I'm going to give just a bit of an introduction about what it is and why we're doing it and why it's working. And I'm really going to focus, I guess, on the collaboration aspects of that. I'm not going to go into too much operational detail or technical detail. And in doing that, I just want to give full disclosure that PlantTech's really at its early stages. We're in the final stages of negotiating our contract with the government for a start on the 1st of July. And on that note, a special shout out to the MB people in the room. Hope you're doing well. Come and see me for a coffee. So I'll really be talking to you about a venture at the start of its journey. So, what is PlantTech? At a high level, it's a collaborative research capability that's focused specifically around AI and automation for premium crop growers, and that targets the space between science and industry. In terms of the collaboration, we've got the companies up there. We've got a broad range across, if you like, the value chain of crop industries. We have Blue Lab, who do sensors for controlled environments, Cucumber, who do technology, strategy and services, Eurofins, which is a large-scale multinational with a base here in the Bay Plenty, lab services company. We've got a couple of companies you'll be hearing from later in the day, Robotics Plus, GPS It, Trimax, who do wide area mowers for turf farms, sports fields, that sort of thing, Waka Digital, who do technology services with a focus on iwi, hapu, Māori organisations, and also Zespri, who I think do something to do with kiwi fruit, not sure. Just in terms of the focus between science and industry, what I mean there is both in terms of the research that we'll be doing and the way we'll do it. So the research is really about, there's lots of awesome stuff that works in the lab and in engineering and computer science labs, but PlantTech's focus will be getting that stuff working out in the field, out in the orchards, and doing that in a way that makes it accessible to smaller companies to be able to build those technologies. It's also collaborative in terms of how we see PlantTech fitting into New Zealand and the world. We're talking about a small organisation when we're up and running after the first year or so, sort of 10 people. So, and a total budget that's less than many individual contracts that the CRIs and universities will have. So we're talking about a small, flexible, highly focused organisation that can only achieve its goals by collaborating with the rest of the world and the rest of the New Zealand system. As to the rationale behind why PlantTech exists, what we're trying to do, that's summarised on this slide. Really, one of the first key drivers is for knowledge-intensive companies in this region. They're competing globally, and they need access to deep expertise in some of these emerging technologies that we don't currently have in the region. So in a way, some of what PlantTech is doing isn't so much that there's brand new capability to the world, but it doesn't exist locally enough for people to access easily and grow their businesses. Secondly, our horticulture sectors, they're looking to exploit new technologies to grow their sectors, to improve productivity and sustainability, and they need to have an ecosystem of technology companies that has the scale and breadth and expertise that can deliver solutions. And then thirdly, for the region, we need to offer something that's going to attract and retain talented people and high-value businesses. At some point in time, the beach itself won't quite be enough. And one of the ways we're looking to do this is to focus our efforts on helping develop some specific areas where we can be a credible global destination for innovation. So out of these overlapping needs came the sort of PlantTech concept, which is an advanced R&D capability focused on technology into horticulture and related industries that's based locally and that fills a gap in terms of the regional and broader national innovation systems. Secrets of success. I talked about how early stage Plantek is, so I thought I'd better put a little asterisk beside success there. We're very early stage, and our success, I guess, if you'll allow it, has been that we have created a consortium of 10 organisations. We've got 8 diverse companies together. We've got shareholders agreements. We've got commitment of $1 million cash investment from those companies over the next 3 years. But I don't think any of us will claim actual success until we can see company growth and job growth that we can point to Plantek as creating. Having said that, as to why we've got to this point and why it's worked so far, the first and foremost point is to say that the 8 companies are the central and primary reason Plantek exists and why it's got to this point. It's probably just an obvious thing to say that the collaboration has worked because of the participation and commitment of the collaborators. Not just sort of nodding heads and having meetings and sitting around a table, but getting stuck in at a number of levels and helping make this thing happen. These companies are already working together in 2s, 3s, and 4s, so we're not just starting from scratch, we're leveraging off an existing set of working relationships. Second element here is the regional context. It's a bit intangible, but it's a very collaborative business community here. It's just the way we do things is to collaborate, and so it makes it easier to develop a new collaboration if it's just how you do stuff. A third factor is what I've termed the silent partners. These are my employers, the university and Priority 1. This has nothing to do with the fact my contract is ending in 2 months, I can assure you. What often happens in these processes is that there's a large proposals, they require a lot of work, and public sector agencies and research organisations can't help but influence, if not sometimes dominate, what gets done. And they've got their own drivers and requirements and their own expertise. And that creates a bit of a dynamic of tension, which just makes things a bit harder to do. And if we've achieved one thing through the development of Plantek, I hope, is that we've used our resources to serve these companies, and that what we've come up with genuinely and unambiguously reflects what these companies think they need to take on the world. And I think that's why we've had a relatively smooth ride to date, getting through things like shareholders agreements and IP agreements, all that sort of stuff, because we've done that way. Lastly, I just wanted to acknowledge the role of central government funding. We've secured $8.4 million over 5 years for the startup, and securing that both provided a bit of a carrot and a deadline to get us moving, and then once we've secured it, it gives us a scale of funds to really get going and make some impact a lot faster than would otherwise be the case. Just to finish with a couple of observations about why I think this collaboration is important. I think there's a first obvious thing, is that Plantek is going to enable these companies to do stuff better and faster than they otherwise could, because they can now access an advanced capability that's specialised on the industries that they're in, and where it's cheaper because they've shared the cost of creating it. But I think that the collaboration is more than this if you think of it as an open innovation initiative, and by that I mean companies having an active strategy of using external resources and ideas in their own innovation. We're bringing together companies succeeding in many different types of market all around the world, from hydroponics to sports fields to turf farms to kiwifruit to iwi and hapu groups and lots of others. And for any one company, especially the smaller to medium companies, they've now got access to a much broader group of talent, and they can really transform their competitive capability through understanding customers, value chains, business models, innovation processes, and technical knowledge through collaborating with each other. Secondly, thinking now just from the perspective of regions, I think this is an example of how collaboration is a way we can turn something that we sometimes talk about as a problem, which is how far we are away and how small we are, into a global competitive strength. Without dropping too much into policy speak, around the world, not so much in New Zealand, but people really look at regional innovation systems and that talk about how where you are influences a lot about your business, who you have access to, who you can connect with. And actually, for Agritech, that seems a significant opportunity for regions in New Zealand, because we live right in amongst outstanding farming and growing industries. And Plantek is an example of where people have come together to create something that couldn't have happened anywhere else. It's because of where we are. And so maybe in Agritech, it's not about being the next Silicon Valley that already exists. It's awesome. It's about being the world's only Bay of Plenty, or Northland, or Hawke's Bay, or wherever, because we've got special things we can claim because of where we are. And collaboration is the way we create the scale and capacity to take that out to the world. I have no reason at all to put up this last slide, other than to show a picture of the beach before I finish, and this was my final opportunity. That's all I had to say about PlantTech. I just want to thank War42 and Jackie and Peter and the Techweek team for the opportunity to talk today. I hope this has been interesting and look forward to the rest of the session. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you very much indeed, Shane. If I may just jump in with a couple of questions specifically on your presentation. Am I right in thinking that PlantTech is actually one of the regional research initiatives that the previous government launched?
That's right.
Oh, very good. So, well, congratulations on securing that funding, because it was very good to see that development of support. And I guess there's not that many of them around that came through in that program.
There were 4.
There were 4, yeah. So no, congratulations on that. The second question, here's a question. Amongst those companies that and organizations that are already members, have some new ideas and new opportunities already bubbled up by the time they've come together? Could you give us an example of that? I'm putting you on the spot there,
yeah.
This is early days.
There are some examples that probably shouldn't talk about at this point, but there's so an example. I guess one of the way PlantTech will work is that there's going to be a core research program, and then member companies will have rights to individual projects they can do. And now a lot of those individual projects have turned into collaborative projects. So companies, rather than doing their own project with PlantTech, are now working in 2s, 3s, and 4s separately from that core program and building. There's a lot of mutual interest around things like deep learning frameworks where people are coming in, so that's the area where they're joining up.
Yes, I'm particularly excited about the ones you can't talk about, because that suggests that they are potentially going to be really, really interesting. Yes. So I look forward to hearing about them in due course. If I may pick up on some of the themes that Shane's identified, but pick them up with Toni and Nicky from your 2 organizations. So with Nicky at Callaghan and Innovation, I'll ask this first, and then come to Toni for your view on this question too. What do you think are some of the main challenges that you've been experiencing when you're attempting to increase collaboration between different stakeholders in projects, and that might have some quite different agendas in the Agritech area? And how's that looking from a Callaghan point of view?
Yeah, so if you look at, I think what works for collaboration is really around bringing great people together with common goal and purpose. And when that doesn't happen, that's really the challenge. It's about the people, the common goal and purpose, and the willingness to work together, which I think what Shane talked about, that's why PlantTech works so well.
So can I just hang on one second? Are you hearing Nicky okay? No, you're not. Let me just grab the handheld here. This is kind of the first aid equivalent of AV. And that is on, I think. Well, of course it's on, it's here as well.
Can I try this?
Try that one.
Is that working? Great.
Oh, that's good. So could you start again? Because you were saying some great stuff which they haven't heard.
It's going to be way better second time.
Thanks.
Yeah. So one of the, I think what we see really well is when you bring people together. Great products and great businesses are all about great people. And when you bring great people together with a common goal and vision and a purpose and a willingness to work together, you get, great outcomes. And I think that's both the great thing about collaboration, but also the biggest challenge. It's, getting the people to work together, the willingness to work together, the common goals and purpose. And I think across Agritech, it's bringing that common goal and purpose together that's really the piece that I think is our challenge as New Zealand.
Yes, thank you. And Toni, down at Lincoln University, you're running the hub. And so how's that question working out for you with the companies that you're working through, where you're trying to bring together people with perhaps some quite different agendas and the like?
So, great question, Rod. And the first bit I'd say is that we're not about the university. We are a much wider organisation. Yes. It's just one of our partners. What we're seeing is right from the beginning, getting that shared vision, but then continuing to work with it as the teams come together, that understanding is consistent, and the communication between the teams as they start to execute, we can't spend enough time on it. So collaboration is a change initiative, and it involves people, and if we leave it early on, we're seeing that we've got to have some interventions. The other part is ensuring that those partnerships are well set up and we understand the different roles of the players, particularly when we've got big organisations and small organisations. Big organisations can sometimes try and take over the small organisations instead of valuing the diversity and what each person has to offer. So it is about people, and it's about communication, and you've got to stay on it all the time. As we get used to collaborating.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to come to you all with another question, but I just wanted to emphasize, please do use the app to send me some questions, because I've got a slightly underpopulated iPad here with questions. So keep the questions coming, because I'm very keen to hear what's on your mind. Turning to Sarah, you've got now some terrific experience drawing on internationally, but now Australian-based. And I was wondering if you could just give us a bit of a sense of the flavour from an Australian perspective about the collaborative opportunities that are developing there, and particularly with bringing in some global partners.
Yeah, so I think it's similar to New Zealand. Australian agriculture is really embracing AgTech and really seeing that AgTech is a new sector that is highly related to agriculture, but actually separate from ag and can bring value in its own right. And so I think that recognition of the potential of AgTech is really quite strong in both countries. In terms of Australia specifically, and I would imagine it's true here, but I can't speak to it, the smallness of the country relative to others actually can be an advantage, because many of the key players can come together and work together more easily. And so we're seeing that with government and private sector startups and researchers finding ways to collaborate at events and through projects. So I think that's really exciting. The last thing I would touch on, I guess, is the farmers themselves and the ag industry. Because of the difficulty of farming in Australia, just the nature of the soils, being far away, one of the least subsidized industries, although I can't say that here. I think that creates a really innovative farming environment, and that's a great opportunity for tech companies in Australia and coming to Australia, because if you can get farmers to adopt technology there, you're really onto something, because it is, they are quite discerning, and they do have some really serious challenges. So that's a great opportunity, especially for Australia.
It's very refreshing to hear somebody describe Australia as a small country, which of course it is in terms of number of people. But of course the Australians wonderfully think of themselves as a big country, as they are physically. And so you're finding that collaboration is still possible when it's so far from Perth to the East Coast, or from the top to the bottom, and also with very strong state focus to the country.
Yeah, I think those are definitely challenges. It's not easy to get everywhere, and it is quite a remote environment in many cases. That said, the tech community has really, I think, done a great job of building a community. So, for example, there's a national network of meetup events, which are free events for entrepreneurs, corporates, farmers to come to, and there are some in cities and in the region, and they're also put out either through Facebook Live or through podcasts. So that's a way that everyone can come together, discuss issues, hear from experts domestically and internationally, and build up a sense of community despite the distance.
Well, really good to hear that. But mind you, it's sometimes hard to get around New Zealand, I'd have to say, even though we're much more compact. Here's a question from Anne-Marie in the audience. What about the constraints of lost competitive advantage that might prevent agribusinesses sharing their data when they come together? How, from all of your experience, how do you encourage people to sort of put their cards on the table?
So I'll start with that. I think that's sometimes a myth more than a reality. And if we look and learn from other industries where they're opening up their information, they're opening up their data, they're opening up their IP, and generating new revenue streams they couldn't have imagined by keeping it closed. And so if I look at the enormous amount of information we collect as an industry here through a range of platforms, how much faster could we innovate if we opened it up and brought people in and brought in some of the learnings from the tech sector? What more possibility could there be? And I think that's one of our challenges, is getting over what we perceive as IP versus opening up to collaboration.
Thanks.
And the value that if we actually do collaborate and come together, the value of what we could do together as opposed to, the value of what we can do together as opposed to, individually. I think we've got to change that mindset of just owning everything. It's a really, really common thing that we keep seeing, but ownership is not the way forward.
Sarah.
Yeah, I think when we talk about collaboration, one thing that, it's easy to say, let's all just work together, but in practice, how do you find something where everyone wins? And one of the ways for corporates, especially, or agribusinesses to do that is to find pain points that are strong enough that they really want to do something to fix them, and that they've found that they can't do it themselves. And there are a number of those on different scales, whether it's embracing artificial intelligence or figuring out how to work with startups that they can work together on. And so I think that's an entry point to say, here's a tangible project where there are possible benefits for all of you that we can come together and work together.
Thank you. Shane.
I think, ultimately it comes down to having a reason to do it. I think if the planting example, for example, a reason why we think we might be able to get to a place where people can share data is that there is one of the ways we can do things like an automation faster is by having specialised image libraries and data sets that are specialised around the particular things that we're doing. And if we can create that data set, we have a competitive advantage that then the companies can draw on themselves that other people don't have. So there becomes a benefit for them sharing that's more than the cost of keeping it to themselves.
I'm going to ask a question that I know is hard to answer. So I'm going to give an answer first, if I may. And this is for the benefit of our overseas visitors. And this is about what is it about how we are in New Zealand culturally and other ways that enables us to collaborate and work together well. I'm not saying necessarily spectacularly better than anywhere else, but it is a bit different here. And so I'm going to answer the question first, if I may, to give you a chance to think about it. I'm very struck now that I'm 21 years old as a New Zealander, that the scale of the country works very well for this kind of collaboration, but there are some downsides to it. So, for example, people can be very stretched. They wear multiple hats. They're juggling lots of stuff because we're trying to run a full-service country with only 4.65 million people. But I think there is something about the diversity of culture here, drawing on some very important things about Tangata Whenua, some kaupapa Māori sense of how we do things, but then there's the Pākehā, there's the European, there's the Pacifica, and then there's increasingly an Asian element to all that. And the fact that we are at the edge of things rather than at the center of things, I think that's another way that that inspires innovation. And so I see this very clearly in a program I'm involved with, which is the Edmund Hillary Fellowship, which is a mix of us New Zealand fellows and international fellows across a wide range of technologies, and the way people are collaborating and working together. And so that in that new program, the international fellows who are chosen have the chance to be here for 3 years on visas to develop their businesses. And we're getting both investors and innovators in here. So I think there is something that is a little hard to explain to people about how that works here in New Zealand. So that was in the essence of how I'm seeing it, and I was wondering how you see New Zealand in that context.
I can have a go, I guess, not specifically. So one thing, when I moved from the States to Australia, I got a lot of sort of, why are you going to Australia to work on AgTech? And when Australia comes to the US, for example, a delegation to Silicon Valley, there's one from New South Wales and then one from Victoria, and they're not sort of coordinated with each other. And why can't they be more like the Kiwis? Why can't they sort of come together and come forward as a common unit representing the whole country? And so I think that's something that New Zealand has done really well, and that Australia has still continued to struggle with a bit, is which state owns AgTech or who's in charge of it, whereas the Kiwis have really embraced a common foot forward, and I think that's done wonders for them around the world in terms of this common front about AgTech.
Nice.
If I add a bit to that, what we see here is it's really easy to bring together the whole ecosystem, and everybody's incredibly generous. Quite often people wear multiple hats, so they're involved in the regulatory environment, they're involved in farms, they're involved in processing, and a big part of the industry is actually relatively pre-competitive. And so the industry gets together to solve things easily, and when we've talked to overseas companies, they're surprised at how we can put everybody in the room, and particularly from the Northern Hemisphere, they just go, you do it so easily and everybody's happy to be there. So I think that's a huge advantage for innovation. We can prototype here, we can pilot here much more easily because the players come together so easily.
Yeah, and certainly from the companies that we see, from particularly really early stage companies, it's a challenge for them. They have to do a lot with a little, very little capital, very little resources. And the only way they can really do a lot of what they do is around collaborating and reaching out to other areas. They also have to look offshore. We can't grow great New Zealand, companies at scale by just looking at New Zealand. They have to look at what the opportunities are offshore. And that's certainly the opportunity that we're seeing is how do we get people offshore with a global focus, develop a New Zealand, think globally, and getting more companies offshore to do that. And there's a huge opportunity to do that, and certainly that's something that we're really strongly trying to support is create that offshore vision. But that collaboration that happens when you get companies offshore working together, that willingness, the shared learnings, there's so many opportunities that come out of that, and so much sort of valuable discussion and collaboration that forms both with the international partners that they connect with, as well as within the sort of New Zealand group, and that's it's really exciting to see that there's a real willingness to do that.
Yes, thanks. And Shane, that sort of cultural element.
Well, just to add into the mix that, as well as the stuff about New Zealand itself, I think as more people are exposed internationally and the scale and the speed with which things happen, the sort of industries we're talking about, New Zealand is a minuscule part of the total spend, and as you are out in the world, you realise you've got to team up if you want to kind of compete in the world, and so there's some competitive drivers in there for people to go, hey, how am I going to compete with these people? And so you're more active in looking around in ways to do that.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll offer two examples, one from the Edmund Hillary Fellowship. We've got a real strength around blockchain, both from New Zealanders and from overseas, and that group of fellows is working closely with government here to try to make sure New Zealand's at the leading edge of regulation on blockchain. But the other wonderful example from Techweek on Monday in Auckland, Peter Beck was talking about Rocket Lab, and he had this very particular view that satellites were miniaturizing, therefore rockets would, therefore you'd need to launch lots of rockets to get, very often to get lots of small satellites up there. When he went to the States to try to find places to have multiple rocket launches, they said, forget it, there's too many planes, too many ships, there's only few windows. And he realized that the US plane couldn't scale up the number of rocket launches, hence his focus back to New Zealand and setting up the site down in the Mahia Peninsula. But that required New Zealand to have a space program and a space regulatory system, and there wasn't one. So Rocket Lab worked with our government to create that space agency within MB and the regulatory process, and then needing to do a joint venture with the US regulation to tie in internationally. And so the idea that that could all happen quite was a lot of work, but it happened fairly effectively here, I think is a very good example of how that works in New Zealand, and I offer that story to our overseas visitors. I would love to see that, and I think we will see that same sort of sense of enterprise in collaboration in our scale and our speed, working very well in AgTech here.